Well, guess who's back? Back again. Sean is back. With no friends. It's time for another pointless live stream of science. I regret to inform myself that nobody has sent me any money for a long time. Not that I've been able to provide any quality content, but boy, if anybody feels like being merciful, now would be a good time. Because it's the end of the month and I'm just scared to even think about my fucking bills. Welcome, viewer. Feel free to say hello in the chats. Looks like I had 2 viewers there for a second. But anyways. So it's been a long day, and it's just another fucking long start to a long week. Because I don't have any plans. Like, I just have nothing to do all fucking week, man. Nothing to do but chat with you if anybody wants to chat. Eh? Eh? Got to take a little nap today. Didn't pass very much time, but passed a little bit of time. Sleeping on my couch is getting my knees kind of crickety and crackety. So I can't really stretch out on this couch. Because I got my pile of shit in the corner. But at least the AC is working. Well, the window unit is working. It's definitely nice and cool in here. I might even be able to sleep in my bed tonight. Maybe. Seems like Misha's having trouble finding a perch spot. She's on the back of my little chair that I got over there. pointless office chair that doesn't have an office to be in. I've been using my desk as a room divider. I don't even know what happened to my computer. There's a 3-drawer bin sitting inside my desk that, like, is just filled with my wife's shit. Apparently she doesn't want her paperwork, her Christmas cards from people. She doesn't want nothing. There's an awful lot of her stuff in there, too. I'm pretty sure it's okay for me to talk about her at this point, because, like, I think the state people who were monitoring this channel to see if I was going to say anything about her got bored and gave up a long time ago. Because, like, I bet you they wound up feeling sorry for me. Because she just keeps on making up shit to try to have me thrown in jail. My dumbass still wants her back. That's the sad part about it, is that I was in love with a fantasy that she created for me. I was in love with someone that wasn't even real. She was just pretending to be who she was, or who I thought she was. And now I guess one day I have to find a woman who can compete with a fantasy. It's not really fair to whoever it winds up being. It's not really fair to me. So I gotta get the fucking fantasy out of my head. Gotta find some way to frame her as a imposter. Just realized that nothing that I thought we had was even real. I tried to make her out to be someone she just apparently wasn't. But anyways, welcome viewer number 2, and thanks for joining me. Y'all do feel free to say hello in the chats. Hey, Karma. I've been using my wife's boyfriend's shampoo that he left over here. Isn't that sad? I'd rather use it than buy more. Doing pretty well on smoking today. I think I only had 6 cigarettes so far. About to put this one out halfway. Maybe I'll have some milk and cookies. Because my milk's almost bad, and, well, I got a lot of cookies. And yes, I'll be drinking out of the carton. That's how I roll. These are Keebler Soft Batch Chewy Chips Ahoy, or Chewy Chocolate Chip Cookies. Soft Batch Chocolate Chips. Damn near live off of these fucking things. Let's see if there's any news we haven't heard already.
My people think it could have been a violation, as you know. I view it differently. I view it as a man. Perhaps he wants to get attention. And perhaps not. Who knows? It doesn't matter. All I know is that there have been no nuclear tests. There have been no ballistic missiles going out. There have been no long-range missiles going out.
It doesn't matter, says the president. His own people think it could have been a violation, but not the president. Those people include National Security Advisor John Bolton, who said just 2 days ago there's, quote, no doubt the missile tests violate UN resolutions. Japan's leader, who was standing right next to President Trump today in Tokyo, shares that view. And it's important to note, these short-range missiles we're talking about aren't capable of hitting the U.S., but they could hit Japan. So what's the president's take? You're not bothered at all by the small missiles?
No, I'm not. I am personally.
Again, Japan's prime minister at that moment standing right next to President Trump. And while Mr. Trump may not be bothered, others are, including members of the president's own party.
Japan does have reason to be concerned, and I am concerned as well. We need to see North Korea back off of those activities, and we need to take a very strong stance on that.
So why is the president ignoring his own national security advisor, members of his own party, and a close U.S. ally? Why is he backing a murderous dictator who killed his own uncle and his own half-brother? A murderous dictator who has imprisoned thousands of political enemies in gruesome conditions, including starvation and torture. A murderous dictator who imprisoned American student Otto Warmbier, finally returning him to the U.S. in a coma, only to die days later. It's not the first time the president has sided with someone whose interests run counter to the U.S. Remember, when the U.S. intelligence community determined Russia had, in fact, meddled in the 2016 election, this is what the president had to say.
I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia.
Out front tonight, Caitlin Collins is live in Tokyo, where the president is set to depart in about an hour. So, Caitlin, this visit was supposed to be about the strong alliance between President Trump and Shinzo Abe, but instead, it seems to now be about the president siding with Kim over Abe and over his own national security advisor.
Yeah, the last several days full of pageantry, all of this pomp. You saw that on display, and it was meant to reinforce the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Abe. But when the reporters started asking questions at that press conference, Erica, that's when you saw the sharp divide that exists underneath all of that pomp that we've seen over the last several days. And North Korea was front and center because the president had no problem brushing off those missiles fired from North Korea, dismissing the concern, even though he knows that the Prime Minister Abe shares a great concern for those and actually wants to make sure that America does take a hardline stance against North Korea. He had conversations with John Bolton just 2 days prior where they agreed that, yes, those missiles did violate those UN resolutions. And then the president was on stage and said, no, he disagreed. He actually didn't think that they violated the resolutions, and he wasn't that worried about them. So you really saw that even though Prime Minister Abe has gone to great lengths not to press President Trump, but to keep him in his good graces by having him be the first foreign leader here to visit the newly crowned emperor, you can still see their differences. So the question going forward is,
I'm actually thinking about turning down this whole window unit.
With President Trump, this chummy relationship that you see between the two of them. And even though, Erica, on stage, he said that yes, Prime Minister Abe said that yes, he does believe these violate the resolutions. He does find that these acts from North Korea are regrettable. He still found a way to praise President Trump and the approach that he takes when it comes to North Korea.
Caitlin Collins, live for us tonight. Caitlin, thank you. Out front tonight, Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, Juliet Kayyem, Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security during the Obama administration, and David Gergen.
I tell you, I just don't know what the fuck to do with myself anymore.
David, if we begin with you, the president is once again contradicting his own folks, his own team. He's contradicting an ally when he's standing right next to. And as shocking as some of that may be, there's also a part that makes you say, well, we've seen this movie before, but I'm wondering how it ends.
Well, it normally ends when somebody has as many disagreements as John Bolton does with the president, that John Bolton is on a short list for leaving. He's been undercut now on his views about North Korea. He's been undercut.
My poor sick old
Iran.
dingo.
He's been undercut about his views on Venezuela and what the Russians are doing there. When you have three strikes against your own president, that's not good news for him. And I must say, I think the president is playing politics with this. I think he's less interested in technology than he is in trying to convince people back home that he's making progress with North Korea, and he wants to make that a big deal. He wants to be able to, show that he's for all this time he's had working with the North Koreans. If he were to acknowledge that they were testing ballistic missiles, for example, even short range, that would heavily suggest that after all this time he's back at square zero, that he really hasn't accomplished anything, and I think that's not in his playbook for 2020.
Which is a fascinating way when you put it in that context. Gordon, we learned, obviously, that flattery goes along with the president.
Oh, I guess I'll lay the fuck
he
back
seems to be
down.
reciprocating when it comes to Kim. I just want to play a little bit more.
Just don't have anything to do. Just fucking nothing.
He's very much into the fact that he believes like
Smoke a cigarette, eat something, lay down. Wake up, smoke a cigarette, eat something, lay down.
And I think that he is looking to develop that way. He knows that
Nothing worth doing, nothing to do.
only bad can happen. He understands that. He is a very smart man. He gets it well.
He's a very smart man. He gets it. He's got the flattery going on there. But, to David's point, that President Trump also doesn't want to be seen.
I think I could actually put on my
as
pajama
not
pants
making
now.
this work. Is he being played
That's
in this
something to do.
instance by Kim?
I think that Trump is being played by Kim, because Kim has not reciprocated Trump's gesture. And one of those gestures is just not enforcing UN Security Council resolutions. Those short-range ballistic missile tests that we've seen recently are violations of UN Security Council resolutions, and Trump's not acknowledging that. And he's also given passes to the Chinese and the Russians and the South Koreans, and I think they on sanctions violations. And I think what's happening here is that essentially Trump wants to give Kim an opportunity really to sort of, reciprocate. And also, he also tries to peel North Korea away from China. So that's, I think, is also involved here.
It leads to, Juliet, though, for this administration, it leads to a lot of cleanup.
Yeah,
I have been struggling to figure out how you describe the Trump doctrine, and I think after today I now know how to describe it. It is the Trump doctrine. In other words, it is all about Trump. When you did those clips earlier, I counted how many times he used I, me, my, and personally.
Hello.
As if Trump is the national interest. And I think that's how the
Want
president
to?
actually sees it. And once you can now understand that, there's no talk of a U.S. interest.
What do you
There's
mean,
no
want
talk
to?
of an
Want
allied
to
interest.
what?
There's no talk of an intelligence community interest. It is about
Why don't you want
his
3?
perception.
By
Is
the
he
way.
being flattered? Is he being criticized? Is he being undermined? And how he can save face. In this instance, I will say Trump is just trying to save face. He clearly, Kim clearly did something that he did not anticipate. So like, you
Oh,
know,
yes,
it's like
of
the
course,
boyfriend
flannel.
who breaks up with you and you're shocked and then you say I didn't really like him anyway, right? This is where Trump
All my
is
pajama
right
pants
now.
are
And
flannel,
the
yes.
Trump doctrine is just the best name for the Trump doctrine. It is just about him. Well, in terms of that Trump doctrine, we got a sense as to what his thoughts are, at least publicly, on where everything stands. This is what else he had to say about Kim today. Take a listen.
I view it as a man. Perhaps he wants to get attention, and perhaps not. Who knows? It doesn't matter. All I know is that there have been no nuclear tests. There have been no ballistic missiles going out. There have been no long-range missiles going out.
David, to Juliet's point, if we listen to that and we put it in the context of what, you know, she's described as this Trump doctrine, it's all about how does it impact me. Maybe in the broader context of the United States, but I think more how does it impact me. But he's saying this, and he's standing next to his ally in this country that could directly be affected by those short-range missiles. So what does that message of indifference, I mean, what kind of message does that send not only to Japan, but to America's other allies?
Well, I'm afraid we've been here many times before, and I like Juliet's description of Trump, the Trump doctrine. Juliet, I would almost call it the Trump anti-doctrine. You know, he doesn't have a strategy, and therefore he doesn't have a doctrine to go with it. But I do think that this, you know, over the first 24 hours of his visit, that was fabulous for Japan. It was very good.
Anyways.
For him, more presidential than we've seen him in a long, long time. I thought he might come out of this whole thing with a high, but he didn't. He
North Korea.
And you know, when he started talking, he got himself into trouble. He's been showing. You know, I would be concerned if those missiles were going to hit the U.S. I'd be very concerned. But if they can hit Japan, you know, not so much. I'm not so worried about that. Not my problem. Well, you can imagine what that says to the Japanese government down deep about how much they can actually rely on America in the event that they're attacked by China or by others. This is the same issue we had with Germany way back when, after the Second World War, about whether they could really rely on us for stopping the Russians from coming in. And they learned over time they could rely on us. It was major for our leadership in the world. And if we really want to be a leader in Asia, as your 2 other guests know better than I, if we want to be a leader in Asia, you've got to be able to stick with your friends and do it in a way that they can rely upon.
Gordon, how damaging was that then today? Because we are seeing too publicly, as you point out, from Japan, they're not necessarily coming out against President Trump, right? They get to how they need to play this and play their hands.
Yeah, I think that, you know, Trump is...
Welcome, viewer number 3. Feel free to say hello in the chats.
But it's a strategy to give Kim time. So I think the Japanese at some level understand that.
Just hanging out.
What David said is right, that there is this difference. That
Oh, they went away.
Short-range missiles do hurt Japan. But remember,
Yeah,
they
well, fuck
also
you
target
then.
U.S.
Nah.
forces in Japan. So it's not exactly we're on different pages. So long-term, probably the Japanese don't like this, but they're willing to give Trump some lesson, some time, because they know that it could work out.
Juliet, last word? So I think Trump believes that America is relevant simply because we're America. And I think what you're starting to see now after 2.5 exhausting years of sort of non-commitment and unreliable foreign policy is you are starting to see the orientation of whether it's Europe or Asia, Canada, Mexico, all heading elsewhere, whether that is China, which it seems to be at this stage, or not. So we should not believe that America is relevant and strong simply because we are America. It takes a president to lead us that way. And I think what you're seeing with this sort of circle of events that we've been through before and will go through again, our lack of reliability is actually a sign of our weakness. And that will have long-term consequences well past this administration. Juliet, David, Gordon, appreciate it. Thank you all. Out front next, the president takes another swipe at Joe Biden, backing up the comments of a dictator. Plus, the I word. Nancy Pelosi doesn't like it, but our latest political target, former Vice President Joe Biden, while also siding with a dictator.
Does it give you pause at all to be appearing to side with a brutal dictator instead of with a fellow American, the former Vice President Joe Biden?
Well, Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that.
The president echoing North Korea's Korean Central News Agency, which speaks for Kim, and recently referred to Biden as a, quote, fool of low IQ. Out front now, CNN political commentators Rob Astorino, member of President Trump's 2020 Re-elect Advisory Council, and Karen Finney, who served as Hillary Clinton's campaign senior spokesperson. Good to have both of you with us tonight. So, Karen, the president doubling down on a tweet that he sent on his way to Japan with the same message about Biden. How much stock are you putting in this?
Not any. I'll tell you, it makes the president seem very weak, and it makes you.
I'm a fool of high
What is it that
IQ.
you're so afraid of? If you have to take the word of
Yep,
a
I
murderous
got a high IQ,
dictator,
but I'm still a fucking
when you're
fool.
on foreign soil, nonetheless, on Memorial Day, nonetheless, when they're attacking a potential rival, but also a fellow American who has served this country. You may not agree with everything that Joe Biden has done, but he certainly served the country with honor and distinction. He's been a public servant for so long, and like I say, it makes you wonder, President Trump, what are you so afraid of?
Rob, I'll let you answer that.
The answer is nothing. But I think everybody just needs to lighten up. I mean, really, the faux outrage on the left about something like this. Come on. I mean, he made those statements himself, the president did, about Joe Biden. And this is the way he is. We know what he did to all the other Republicans running against him in the primary 2.5 years ago.
That's your defense? This is the way he is?
Hit very, very hard, just as the Democrats are all taking shots at the president. This is what we do in America. This is called a presidential campaign, and we're going to see much harder hits as we go forward. But I think Joe Biden, the hardest hits he's going to get are from 23 other Democrats who have yet to really aim their arrows at him, but they've got a lot to work with Joe Biden through a course of a lifetime when Jimmy Carter was president, and that's when Joe Biden started in Congress. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to go after Joe Biden on, and believe me, the 23 other Democrats are going to hit him much harder than Trump will for at least the next 6 months.
No, there's like maybe 3 things.
I just have a question on one thing, Rob. Even Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger weighing in, he put this tweet out, quote, "It's Memorial Day weekend and you're taking a shot at Biden while praising a dictator. This is just plain wrong." Doesn't he have a point here? Because it is Memorial Day. But how is any of this, Rob, to your point? Yes, there's politics, and yes, we're going to see more infighting, certainly among Democrats, that we can agree on. How, though, is this helping President Trump? You're on the advisory council.
Welcome back, viewer number 2.
With his re-election.
Because I think half the country sees it for what it is, like, okay, another comment that he makes that people agree with or didn't agree with. But it wasn't the comment that the North Korean agency made. It was the comment that President Trump had made first. I mean, this is part of his nicknames, right?
What's
he tries
the
to swat
3?
people down with the various nicknames. Creepy Joe, Sleepy Joe, whatever you want to call him, but that's what Trump will do. So when it was said by somebody else, he didn't praise Kim Jong-un. He said, this is what he said, and I agree, because he said it first.
But we should say that he is calling him a smart man over the weekend. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, the 3 that
Well, the very
geez.
fact that, I mean, it's Rob, come on, seriously. Your best defense is that President Trump called him a name first, so that makes it okay when a dictator calls him a name. Here's the problem.
Credit card finance havens in
Here's
Delaware.
the problem with it. It's not the first time that President Trump has sided
his
with
gaffes,
someone who is either a dictator
and maybe
or
his
a foreign leader who has
overbearing
interests are not aligned with the United States. He has taken the word over
Gro-
Vladimir Putin,
his
over our national
his
security
touchy-feeliness with
agents
women.
who have given him plenty of data and information about Russian hacking, and he stood there several times and said, well, Putin told me, so I believe him. And more horrifyingly,
That's about it.
he defended Kim when the worm beers came out. And I mean, what a heartbreaking video to see Mrs. Warmbier talk about her child. And we know the horrible condition that their son Otto was in when he was returned to
I
the
still
United
like Joe
States.
Biden,
There was
though.
a time
He's
in
cool.
this country where people would be afraid to return an American in that condition. Clearly, Kim is not afraid of Donald Trump at all. So it's not just this one name calling. just one time, and it doesn't really matter who said it first. What matters is that this president, time and time again, will side with, whoever it is convenient for him to do so to make himself look good rather than
He's pretty damn old,
to
though.
be presidential, to be more magnanimous.
Go ahead, I think want to jump in, Rob.
Yeah, no, I mean, look,
He's in good health.
all day
You and
long.
Karen go back and forth on anything. I think if we know that, that's why we have you here.
But again, this is part of a presidential campaign, okay? And it cracks me up to hear the Democrats go, "Oh, look at him, how terrible! He's siding with a dictator." Give me a break, okay? We've got people like Bill de Blasio,
But let me ask you about siding.
Bernie Sanders, who can't even bring himself to go after Maduro in Venezuela as it's falling apart and people are dying. That's where the Democratic Party itself is going. The comment that the president made first, by the way. So to me, it's hysterical that this is the issue of the day.
Well, it's an issue that I think may come up again, which is good news for the two of you because we are out of time tonight, but there will be from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Here's freshman Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
This is not about the 2020 election. It's about doing what's right now for our country.
Why do you think you can't convince a majority of House Democrats that it's time to impeach him?
No, I think it is moving towards that. It's going to demand it. It already is.
Phil Mattingly is out front. So, Phil, are there more Democrats today in the House that are moving toward impeachment?
I think there's no question there are more Democrats, Erica, that are moving in that direction than there were perhaps, say, 2 weeks ago. And I think part of that is just frustration, sheer palpable frustration you picked up a lot on last week, where you just looked at what the Trump administration was doing related to witness testimony, related to document requests, related to subpoenas, basically saying no at every single turn. And Democrats last week, particularly early on last week, were saying there has to be something else we can do to try and get the information they say they need to conduct the kind of the wide-ranging investigations they have. Now, at the same time, last week, you saw 2 court cases come down, at least on the district level, on the side of House Democrats. And that's where you've seen Speaker Nancy Pelosi say in private meetings and in public to the press that that was kind of evidence that their strategy, at least at this point, was working. And there's something key to remember here. One thing to note on launching an impeachment inquiry, you've seen a number of members on the Judiciary Committee, the crucial committee on this issue, start to move towards the direction of an impeachment inquiry. But as long as the chairman, Jerry Nadler, is not quite there yet, and frankly, as long as the speaker is not there yet, and Nancy Pelosi has made clear she's not, likely they will not move in that direction. It's also important to keep in context the numbers. While more Democrats are clearly moving in that direction, the numbers are still not a majority of the caucus, and until that critical mass really forms, you're likely not going to see the speaker move in that direction. A couple key things here to keep in mind. One, the reason why people were thinking about pursuing an impeachment inquiry is they think that'll give them a stronger case in court. Pelosi's response to that is, hey, we're winning in court at this point in time. From Pelosi's perspective, it's not just the politics of it, it's also what's the end game here. Knowing the Senate is run by Republicans, 53 to 47, knowing those Republicans are likely not going to vote against the president on this, she doesn't want to turn what she calls a very divisive political issue into the only thing people discuss, particularly when there's a re-election coming up for a lot of Democrats who in 2018 won in districts that President Trump won. Big question now is the momentum we saw sort of building last week, will that carry over, or will some of those court wins have the effect Speaker Pelosi wants? We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, a long time left to go on this one, Erica.
Phil Mattingly with the latest for us. Phil, thank you. Out front now, Democratic Congressman from Maryland, Jamie Raskin. He sits in the House Judiciary Committee, which would oversee potential impeachment proceedings. Sir, good to have you with us. We just heard some of the reporting there from Phil. We heard Representative Tlaib say she believes more Democrats are moving to impeachment. Phil talked about the momentum that there was last week. Where do you think that momentum stands today, based on your conversations?
Let me just distinguish between impeachment articles, which is an indictment, and impeachment inquiry into whether or not there have been high crimes and misdemeanors against the American Republic, and whether we should proceed to articulate the standards and then apply them. I think that there is a lot of momentum towards an impeachment inquiry, and even as people go home over this break, they're hearing more and more from their constituents about it, and every day I think more people are signing on to it. But I think we should be very clear about what they're signing on to. I think that whatever divisions are in the caucus have really been overstated. I think that there's a convergence of view that we need everything on the table at this point, including the 25th Amendment, including the impeachment clause, including the speech and debate clause, including the emoluments clause. We have a very unstable, fluid situation with this president, who is the most reckless and norm-destroying president of our lifetimes. And We need every tool in the constitutional toolkit on the table in order to respond effectively. And I think that the caucus has maintained a lot of cohesion, a lot of sense of focus and purpose about this, as have millions and millions of American people who are really very anxious about what this president has been doing to our democracy.
When it comes to an impeachment inquiry, which, correct me if I'm wrong, you're in favor of, yes?
Yeah, well, I want it to be on the table, and I think, look, those of us who are on the Judiciary Committee have seen up front, close and personal, tremendous evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors and presidential obstruction of justice, both through the Mueller report, but also through all of the misconduct of the administration since then, when the president made history in a completely unprecedented way by ordering people in the executive branch not to cooperate with Congress, to violate subpoenas, to not turn over evidence. What we're seeing is contempt of Congress being imposed in a systematic and wholesale way by the administration.
So when it comes to this impeachment inquiry, right, and you say you want to have all the options on the table, we know that Speaker Pelosi is not there. She's saying, and I quote, she's not sure that you would get any more information with that. What do you specifically think this impeachment inquiry could bring you in terms of information, and what do you think it would take to convince Speaker Pelosi that that was the right path?
Well, first of all, Speaker Pelosi said this past week, though, that what we are seeing is a presidential cover-up, and that is an impeachable offense. So I don't know how much distance there really is between her and where people are moving on this. But look, the information that we're getting...
Are we misunderstanding what she's saying? Well, because she's still come out pretty clearly saying she's not there yet. This is not what you need to focus on.
I think she is correctly pointing out, as the leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, that impeachment is, always has been, and remains an extraordinary remedy that you only use under extraordinary circumstances. And if it's going to be divisive or polarizing, it should be disfavored. If it's going to be unifying people behind the Constitution, behind the rule of law, then the calculus shifts there. But the point about information is really important. What we're winning on is our Article I power under the Constitution to collect evidence, to engage in fact-finding. So we're winning on the accountants, the Mazars case in the Oversight Committee. We're winning on the Deutsche Bank in financial services and so on. But all of that is just evidence that we're collecting, and it's evidence that pushes us more towards an impeachment inquiry because it's revealing more and more high crimes and misdemeanors. Winning evidentiary skirmishes on their own is not a goal unto itself. All of that is instrumental to get the goods that we need in order to understand the criminality and the lawlessness of the industry.
I do want to really quickly get your take on something else. In terms of Attorney General Bill Barr's investigation into the origins of the Russia probe, Sarah Sanders was asked about specifically this weekend whether the president would accept that outcome. Take a listen.
We already know that there was an outrageous amount of corruption that took place at the FBI.
So the president is not going to accept exoneration if that's what Bill Barr finds.
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of what the final conclusion is, but we already know that there was a high level of corruption that was taking place.
So she was asked if she would accept a conclusion that everything was done legally. Do you think the American, well, quick two-part question. Do you think, A, the American people will know, and B, will you be able to tell whether what we're being given by Attorney General Barr is in fact an honest finding, or whether it's the outcome that the president wants
Misha.
and has already decided on?
Well, both President Trump and
Stop
Attorney General
fucking
Barr
knocking
are
everything over. Oh my God.
took place, and that it was illegitimated, it was a deep state conspiracy, and it was a witch hunt, and it was angry Democrats and all of this nonsense. I mean, it's an absolute
cat's a terrorist.
paranoid conspiracy theory that the president has sold the Attorney General on, and the Attorney General shamefully, in a disgraceful show of sycophancy to the president, has agreed to go along with it and say he's going to investigate the investigators. And everything that we saw about that over the last 2 years, because remember, this was the theory that the Republicans were proceeding on in the Judiciary Committee inquiries into Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, is that all of this complete nonsense, all they had against Strzok and Page was that they had called the president a moron or an idiot, and we can find you lots of comments by Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio where they said he's a compulsive liar and he's a serial philanderer and is unqualified for office. You know, wait till we bring out everything all the Republicans said about him, which are just exactly what these FBI agents said, like half of America or more said.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, appreciate your time tonight.
A
Thank
serial
you.
philanderer.
Thank you.
Sounds
Outfront
kinky.
Next 11 impacted you, generating thousands of responses, raw, emotional, many of them heartbreaking responses. I'm in constant pain every day, and I think about killing myself. Another reads depression, anxiety, still can't deal well with loud noises. I was assaulted by one of my superiors. Also this, the combat cocktail, PTSD, severe depression, anxiety, isolation, suicide attempts, never-ending rage. It cost me my relationship with my eldest son and my grandson. Out front now, founding director of the New York City Veterans Alliance, Kristen Rouse, who served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the Army. She's given 25 years of service to this country. We appreciate you coming in today. This really started quite a conversation, and the question itself is a great one. How has your service impacted you? These responses, do you think this is what the Army expected?
We're going on 18 years of war, continuous war in multiple countries. The cost of these wars has been borne by our military, by our veterans community, by their families, who often feel invisible, ignored. And I think just with this tweet, it's so evident that veterans have so much to say that they haven't been heard on over these 18 years. And we also heard on this Twitter thread from individuals who served or whose families served well prior to 9/11. It shows that our veterans and military community really needs to be heard.
They need to be heard. We know too, I mean, the numbers are staggering every time we hear them, but these are coming from the VA. As many as 20% of veterans from Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom are now living with PTSD. And then they also give us the numbers on suicide. From 2008 to 2016, more than 6,000 veterans have died as a result of suicide every year. That is becoming more of a conversation. How much, though, do you think these tweets and even the conversation we're having right now may lead to a more constructive conversation in actually dealing with things?
We can't talk enough about it. It is wonderful that this is getting attention, that this really struck a chord with people to see the individual stories. These are the stories that we see in the veterans community all the time. It's why veterans they came back from Vietnam and they formed organizations to advocate for veterans who were being left behind or unserved by the resources that were there for them. They created resources that they needed. Veterans returning from the wars that feel especially forgotten in the 80s and the 90s, they've needed resources this whole time. But veterans en masse have come back from our wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere to advocate for the veterans who are telling these stories, for the family members left behind by veterans that we've lost to suicide, to overdose, to all of these issues. But also veterans can feel isolated, and they can come home and be the great leaders that we've been trained to be, and come home and work great jobs and do great things, but still feel very isolated and forgotten by a nation that barely remembers that it's still at war. When we have colleagues, friends, families, loved ones who are still overseas, because that's part of our community. And so much of America, while well-meaning in saying we support our troops, we appreciate our veterans, they're not learning these stories.
And that's what they need to know. We have about 30 seconds left, but I want to make sure you have the time. When you
Well, that was over quickly.
Good evening and good Memorial Day. Today means so much to anyone who's lost someone in wartime service to the country. It's a day to remember their sacrifice, but also to honor the commitment that we all share, from the Commander-in-Chief on down to the men and women who are serving right now all around the world. Vice President Pence marked the day by visiting Arlington National Cemetery, where he spoke of efforts to resolve the nuclear standoff with North Korea. For the 33,000 American servicemen and women died in the Korean conflict. Some are buried here, and as you know, it's a war that never formally ended. Right now, approximately 30,000 U.S. troops are stationed in South Korea, with more than twice that number posted to Japan, in part to deter Kim Jong-un. Because Japan and South Korea are allies. They're our friends. North Korea is a dangerous adversary, which you'd think would be too obvious to even mention. Yet today, just as he did over the weekend, President Trump sided with the adversary over the allies. And he did it on the home soil of one of those allies, Japan. It began on Saturday, the president reacting on Twitter to North Korean testing of short-range missiles earlier this month. And I'm quoting now from the president, "North Korea fired off some small weapons, which disturbed some of my people and others, but not me. I have confidence that Chairman Kim will keep his promise to me," and also smiled when he called swamp man Joe Biden a low IQ individual and worse. Perhaps that's sending me a signal. Now, keeping him honest, just on the military question, these weren't exactly pop guns, as the president seems to suggest. According to a recent report from the Congressional Research Service, the testing may be intended to improve North Korea's ballistic missile fleet, which is a bad thing for the South, for Japan, and of course for the United States, for the world. One more bad thing, as National Security Advisor John Bolton told reporters over the weekend, the testing violates a UN Security Council resolution. So there's that. Choosing to believe a nuclear-armed adversary over his own hand-picked National Security Advisor. They're doing it while visiting an ally, one which falls within missile range of North Korea, one hosting tens of thousands of U.S. troops and many more American civilians. And compounding it all, the president also tried to enlist this dictator into what exactly? Denouncing a political rival? Whatever he did in that tweet, he did it again today.
Does it give you pause at all to be appearing to side with a brutal dictator instead of with a fellow American, the former Vice President Joe Biden?
Well, Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that. But at the same time, my people think it could have been a violation, as you know. I view it differently. I view it as a man. Perhaps he wants to get attention, and perhaps not. Who knows? It doesn't matter.
Who knows? It doesn't matter. You know what? The President of the United States should know, and that does matter. And if the President doesn't know, he should take his fingers off the Twitter machine and maybe pick up a briefing book and do something that we all know he rarely does, which is read. The President still acts like he is a powerless real estate developer in New York, lying about building height and who he's dating and calling up gossip columnists using pretend names to crow about his sexual prowess. The president is acting like a bystander to everything that's going on. Who knows what's going on? Believe me, it doesn't matter. Believe me. Now, on the one hand, you might say this is just one of the president's vocal tics. It doesn't matter. Like, we'll see what happens. But keep him honest. What if this is really what he believes? What if, in what he's saying and how he's jumbling it all up with domestic politics, the president is essentially indifferent to the rest? That he really believes it doesn't matter. For instance, whether or not North Korea is violating international law and working to make its nuclear missiles more lethal. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that by letting the North slide on short-range missiles, he's sending a message to South Korea and Japan that the United States is only looking out for itself and not them. And signaling to North Korea it can do whatever they want because the president believes a brutal dictator wouldn't break a promise to Donald J. Trump. I mean, sure, he might have his family member, top general, executed with an anti-aircraft gun, but he certainly wouldn't lie to Trump. Not after Trump made him that promo video that was straight up Team America. Or maybe he's signaling that it just doesn't matter what you say at the State of the Union to the grieving parents of an American Otto Warmbier who was killed at the hands of Kim Jong-un.
Tonight we pledge to honor Otto's memory with total American resolve. We need only look at the depraved character of the North Korean regime to understand the nature of the nuclear threat it could pose to America and to our allies.
Total American resolve. Remember the resolve? He was going to take on the mantle of the shutdown. He was going to own that. That didn't last very long. Resolve, it's not a word he uses or actually lives by very much. The State of the Union, that was back in January of last year. It sure sounds like North Korea's actions mattered back then, just like they mattered to every president going back to Harry Truman. They were, after all, what millions fought against and 33,000 Americans died for. The president standing in the House chamber last year, he sure sounded like he understood that. Now, he seems to believe that he and Kim are both just a pair of real estate tycoons or something, and the North is just another business opportunity.
It's located between Russia and China on